All right, so welcome everybody to the Rossland Museum and Discovery Centre. So glad to have you guys joining us here for another speaker series, and we're especially grateful that you braved our parking lot sea out there. It may not be our parking lot to own, but it is definitely our and your burden to bear when you come visit. So I appreciate it very, very much. We also like to start off any of our events by acknowledging that we live and work on unceded Sinixt Tulau. So we're just saying we acknowledge we're on Sinixt territory, and as a part of that, we usually try and do things like share some words in the Sinixt dialects and Selshing. So tonight, I'm happy to see all you lovely people here today. So we're actually going to learn the word for people. So it is Skalu. Skalu. Awesome. So we'll do it all together on the count of three. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Skalu.
Awesome. You guys are great. You're going to be like learning a new language by the time you get like speakers here. So we do have our gift shop is still available here tonight, and it'll be open all throughout the Christmas season. The only days that not, it's going to be Christmas itself and then New Year's after that. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And we will also have another speaker series coming up in January, the last Thursday. Dan Greck is a travel writer, and he did a Pan American tour from the Pan American Highway, so the whole stretch all the way up to Alaska. So a pretty incredible tale he's going to be telling that last Thursday in January, so you won't want to miss that one either. With all that said, I know you guys aren't here to hear me talk. You guys have come here to hear Richie, local legend, person that we are going to shamelessly put up here every single time that we can. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Richie up to the front here. Thank you.
First of all, I gotta thank Skylar for really some of these old pictures were pretty faded out, through the years because it's 1956. So he did a great job of enhancing a lot of them, and so just I'm gonna have to read most of this, or I'm gonna get all mixed up. So just bear with me, and it's mostly about a pack horse story, and so right off the bat, I just wanted to give a little history of how I got the chance to get up onto this expedition. So anyway, a little history on the business, and I'd always liked being around horses from a young age, growing up in Rossland. And Gib Hunt ran a little grocery store and meat market on the corner of Queen Street and 2nd Avenue. He and his wife kept a couple of horses right behind the store there in the stable, and I still remember their names, Spike and Molly. And when Ken Chick Grizzly Jones and I, we grew up together on 3rd Avenue there. We were in high school, and I think it was only just 1 year we did this, but it was our job to go tether these 2 horses out every morning before school, and in the fields in front of our houses on 3rd Avenue, because it was all fields from 3rd Avenue down to the railroad tracks and to where Golden City Manor is now, and of course that was all warehouses at that time too. So, but that was all fields. It's all houses now, and so then we take them back after school, clean out the stalls, and I think we got paid about 50 cents a week for that. And sometimes we would take them down to Pollock's blacksmith shop on 4th Avenue to get them shod. So anyway, this next picture. This is Bunny Griffiths on the top here on the left. This is Booty Griffiths' older brother, Bunny. He was a great outdoors guy, and I'm pretty sure the guy next to him is Gunnar Erickson. But they were in one of our fall fair parades in 1947. So I just kind of wanted to show that because we were talking about a bunch of pack horses. And this one here, I thought it's kind of a bad picture, but it's an old one, probably taken with an old box camera. And it's my brother Harry, just on the left-hand side right here. And this is Hollaboff's old skid horse. And Hollaboff's used to have the farm where Dr. O'Flanagan and Carmel live now. So that used to be Hollaboff's farm. What they were doing there when Al and Bob Dixon were cutting all the trees off the main run, my brother Harry and Bud Scorby had the contract to skid all these poles out to build the towers for our first Red Mountain ski lift. So I just thought that might be interesting for people to see. This is Will Gibbard's pack string up on top of Old Glory, and I did love this picture. I borrowed this from the museum, and look how good a shape those horses are in. You know, he really looked after his horses really well. He was a great guy. So anyway, yeah, Will Gibbard, he was a packer getting supplies up to meteorology station on top of Old Glory, and I always admired what he did and got to know him fairly well when I was young and dreamed of doing the same thing when I got older. So this is Wilf in one of the parades, 1958, our Centennial Parade. There's Wilf right here. I think that horse's name was Velvet, if I remember right. But yeah, he was a great packer, that guy. So anyway, the chance came when I got working for forestry for a couple of seasons after leaving grade 13 and trail, starting in the spring of 1952. So me and my buddy were repairing the phone line to Old Glory. And then from then, so looked like I was leaving school then, and I went on the Castlegar Fire Suppression Crew, followed by Slash Crews in East Kootenays for the next couple of years. And one of my bosses on the Slash Crew was Cecil Smith. He was an ex-guide from Banff, and he and his wife Elsie retired from forestry in the fall of 1953, bought some land at Deer Lake, which is called Whitetail Lake now. There's Canal Flats, and there's Whitetail Lake there. So they bought a piece of land. It was an old logging camp right in there. And then they got this guiding territory up Dutch Creek. So then they bought 40 head of horses, all the pack gear and stuff from Frank Richter in Invermere. They asked me to join them in their new venture, and I jumped at the chance to learn the ropes. I stayed with them from the fall of 1953 to the spring of 1955. This shows, part of that bunch of horses. It was quite a bunch. Wrangling, packing, and guiding up Dutch Creek, so I was learning the business a bit. By the spring of 1955, I was getting to know enough about packing and wrangling horses to go on my own when forestry offered me a patrolman job in the White Swan, White River area in the Rockies east of Canal Flats that summer. Well, there's White Swan. There's no road in here yet. And the pack trail went right from Canal Flats right through here, through the Lucier Hot Springs and Moose Lake. I think they've changed that name of that lake now. I'm not sure. And then the pack trail went on the north side of the lake. The highway now comes up here on the south side. But anyway, my forestry cabin was right on the northeast corner there of the lake. So anyway, they were going to pay me for 2 horses that summer, and so I rented 2 from Cecil, my boss, and then he gave me another 3-year-old strawberry roan colt to break out that summer. It was a day's ride from Canal Flats to the forestry cabin on the northeast corner of White Swan Lake, and this was my base camp for the summer. And the plane would come in every few weeks or so and bring me some fresh eggs. So anyway, my job was to keep all the trails open up the White River and the Palliser and back down to Kootenay. And to make that loop, it would usually take me about a week travel around, but on some of the shorter trails, maybe only a couple of days. But so in my spare time, they had me build a warehouse out there at the same time. You see an elk hanging on that one there, and my neighbor, he was a patrolman in there the year before. Him and his wife lived out there in a cabin, and so he had got an elk. This would have been probably early September. You'd see it hanging there with cheesecloth on it. So anyway, yeah, was my 3 horses that I had that summer. This is up the White River. So it was a beautiful summer, but most of the time I was out in the trails there by myself, but it was kind of nice. It would have been nice to have somebody to share it with. But anyway, while I was in the White Swan country that summer, I met Norman Scherf, who was cooking for a survey crew that was laying out the road to come into White Swan in the White River area. Norman, he was a lawyer from Germany, taking time off to explore the wilds of Western Canada. And the year before this, in 1954, he worked as a cook for the Federal Department of Mines. It was a geological expedition in the Yukon under Dr. John Wheeler from the Department of Mines in Ottawa. He wanted to go back with Dr. Wheeler in 1956, as the doctor was planning another trek into the Yukon in 1956. So Norman said he was still in contact with Ottawa, and he'd find out if there was a chance for both of us to get hired on. Norm's not in that picture, that's just the geologist there. That's White Swan Lake there. So my folks had sold their house in Ross in 1953 and moved down to Burnaby, BC to look after my aging grandparents. I needed work for the winter of 55, 56, so I boarded out my horses for the winter in Canal Flats, and in case I was going to take the patrolman job again the next summer. I left Canal Flats to spend the winter with my folks, got a job with some bricklayers for the winter. Norm was in contact with Ottawa all through the winter, and it did turn out that Dr. Wheeler wanted him back as a cook, and he had one packer hired but needed another one, so I jumped at the chance to go. As it turned out, I had to make a choice. I had 3 packing jobs lined up that summer, and the one I could have my patrolman job back. Oh, that's the first pack on that little bronc. Yeah, he was pretty good though, but so I could have the patrolman job back in forestry, and a sheep outfit out of Kamloops needed a packer to follow their sheep herd through the mountains north of Kamloops. So that was pretty interesting, I thought too. But anyway, this packing job in the Yukon under Dr. John Wheeler, needless to say, I'd never been up north. Have this chance to be part of the trek through the Yukon, it was a great opportunity. Norman got it organized for us to meet Dr. Wheeler and his crew in Whitehorse in the middle of June 1956. So I came back to Canal Flats spring of that spring and to find homes for my 3 horses. 2 plus my gear went back to Cecil Smith, and the now Greenbrook 4-year-old I sold to another outfitter. I then made my way back to Cache Creek to meet Norman, who was coming by bus from Vancouver. We continued on to Dawson Creek by bus, and then I know we hitchhiked the Alaska Highway to Whitehorse. I can't remember how many days it took us to get there, but I do remember climbing aboard some trucks and stuff, and a lot of that I can't really remember very much about, so long ago. Anyway, we arrived in time to meet Dr. John and the 3 student geologists, as well as the other packer. The 3 students' names I remember were Milton, Dan, and Jim, and I can't remember their last names, but the other packer was Andy Porterfield, an older, very experienced packer from Atlan, BC. He had packed these government horses for John before and knew them really well. Dr. Wheeler, he was a great guy to work for and a very experienced mountain climber, belonging to the Alpine Club of Canada. He really preferred hiking through the hills supported by horses rather than being dropped off on tops of the mountain by helicopters. He always said he could pick up more rock samples hiking up the hill when he was fresh, rather than being dropped off and coming down and then try to get what you can. And so he was really against them using helicopters. So after spending a day or so in Whitehorse, getting to know everyone, learning about the expedition and going over all our gear, John drove Andy and I up the Klondike Highway number 2 to the trading post at Pelly Crossing, which is a little over halfway to Dawson City. Lindsay, you must know that country well. This would have been mid to late June, and he left us with enough provisions, 2 riding saddles, and pack equipment for 1 horse for the next few days. So it was our job to go get these horses and then meet those guys later on. The Wilkinson family ran the trading post, and they had 2 adult sons and a daughter that were all part of the business. Ed, Jared, and Elsie were the adult kids. Each had their own trap lines and teams of sled dogs that were tied up behind the post. And after spending the night at the post, Ed and Jared took Andy and I by motorized riverboat 20 miles down the Pelly River to Pelly Farm to pick out our horses for the summer. So this is the Pelly Farm here back then. And I see there's a road all the way down from Pelly Crossing to Pelly Farm now, but there wasn't then. Pelly Farm was taken over by Hugh and Dick Bradley, 2 brothers from the prairies in 1954. And they were doing really well, raising Hereford cattle and all sorts of vegetables for the Yukon market. They were also boarding 30 head of these government horses. Dick's nephew, Dale Bradley, is still running this mixed farm today and still operating, running some cattle and the tourist business on the side. So these are pictures I just got off the internet recently. And it's kind of a banana belt there compared to White House. And they always said they could grow more stuff here than they could farther south than White Horse. So it was kind of interesting. Andy and I needed to pick out 18 head of these government horses to use for the summer. So Andy knew them pretty well, and he had used them a couple of years earlier. So with the help from the Bradleys, we got our bunch picked out. Andy and I saddled up and caught a lead mare to start taking them all back up to Pelly Crossing. That's just a list of the horses, and I'm sure happy that I did write their names down years ago, because I would never remember them by now. Anyway, so anyway, we started heading back up to Pelly Crossing on the pack trails, and there was a pack trail there, but there wasn't any road yet. With Andy leading a big mare, I started hazing from behind. It soon became obvious we had 3 separate mini bunches, including the one Andy had. And they knew all these horses knew all the trails, and we sure didn't. So as one bunch was trying to get back to the ranch and trying to get the other one bunch, and we were one of the hardest days I ever rode in my life, I think. And they were all trying to head back to the ranch every chance they could. So anyway, while I'd be chasing one, he'd be holding another bunch, and we finally got them all up to Pelly Crossing in the corral after changing saddle horses part way up. When 2 we were riding, they were getting pretty worn out. All these horses hadn't been worked for over a year, and they were all pretty fat and frisky, but soft, which was to our advantages. You know, they finally tired out and were a little bit easier to handle. And so anyway, and neither of us ridden all winter, riding these government, I still remember that, riding these government saddles that we weren't used to. We didn't have our own saddles. Sorted us up pretty darn good that day. The next morning, we saddled, packed our traveling gear to head south along the gravel Klondike Highway towards Carmack's. At that time, the road was pretty well all gravel. I think it's probably paved now. At the time, there was only a ferry crossing the Pelly River. There's a bridge across there now, and we were on the north side at the trading post, and needed to get all the horses across to the South Virginian village on the south side of the river. So this where the trading post there was, and you can see the road heading on down to the farm here now. And then there's a bridge across the river now, and then the Indian villages, the South Virginian villages over here. The Pelly was quite large that time of year with spring runoff, and so our best option was to load them all loose on the ferry, contained at both ends with ropes tied across. And I'm pretty sure we must have hung on to our 2 saddle horses and our 1 pack horse that was carrying our supplies. Well, we got about 50 feet from shore or so, from the south shore landing, when all hell broke loose. All the horses that were loose on the ferry bolted into the water, took off, galloping all through the village. Yeah, I know, it was, no, not again. We were still pretty sore from the day before. So we spent most of that day we roped a few, and then started herding the rest to where we could get them contained in the village and hobbled for the night. But I still can't remember where we had a pen or a corral. That part I can't remember how we got them all contained, but we did anyway, and we were still pretty sore from the day before. But while they were all running through the village, one unfortunate thing did happen that day, and it was too bad. While they were all tearing through the village and the trees, this little buckskin mare caught a branch or something and lost an eye. Yeah, I know, it was pretty sad. So we decided to call her Wimpy. And we weren't going to put her down, that's for sure. We were going to try to keep her going all summer long and get her back to the farm to retire her off. So we decided to just put the lightest load on her and let her tag along at the back of the string once we got going, where the other horses wouldn't pick on her. Our plan was to get her through the summer and back to retirement at Pelly Farm in the fall. Horses always have a pecking order, whether they're running wild in a bunch or whether you've got them loose in a string like ours. So you kind of have to give them time and room to sort themselves out when you're heading out for the day. When I was packing in the East Kootenays, we head and tail tied our pack strings by tying the halter shank of one to the tail of the one in front. Now we tie the halter shank to a breakaway rope on the pack saddle in front. I can show you a bit of that in a minute. It was much easier on the horses when getting into trouble, like when getting one around the tree. It was kind of hard when you're tied head to tail, but when you use this pig and string on the back of the pack saddle, it'll break away when you get into trouble. So it's a lot better way of doing things than we did back then. So anyway, in the Yukon, it was the first time that I got to learn how to do this, and we didn't head and tail tie up there, but led one and hazed all the rest from behind, basically for two reasons. One being the size of the string that we were going to have, and we're not traveling on good pack trails or anything, we're crashing bush and stuff. So we're going through poor or no trails, and the other reason was to make it easier crossing the large muskeg flats. Up there in late June, permafrost was only down maybe about a foot or so in the muskegs, but by September it was down around 3 feet or more. So what we always did was lead one across and just haze the rest from behind. These Yukon horses, they had been used quite a bit up there, and they were pretty wise as far as crossing the muskegs, and they would find their own bushes and things to step on, so usually they wouldn't get bogged down. They were pretty careful. On our first day after catching all the horses in the village, we saddled up with my partner Andy riding Buster. There's Buster right there, and that's one of my saddle horses, Bud there, and that's one of our, well, that'd be the cook tent, and you see the smoke coming out. And Buster, he was a pretty tough little 14-2 hand-high bay gelding, leading a large black mare called Darky. And Darky was traveling our packing gear. This is just leaving Pelly Crossing. We haven't met all the rest of the crew yet. We're just moving horses for now. So we were just packing one mare. So that was Darky. She was the boss mare of the whole herd, so the others would follow her pretty well. We had a bell on Darky as well, and we put a bell on a few of the others, making it easier to find them in the morning. And also it was acted as pretty good protection against predators. And we hardly ever saw any bears or anything, but we did see lots of tracks. But when they'd hear the bells come along, they'd move out of the way, and when they're hobbled at night, we weren't too worried about them. We started our way south along the gravel highway towards Carmack's. There wasn't a lot of traffic back then, mostly a few semis hauling supplies or material back and forth from Whitehorse, Mayo, Dawson City. Things settled out pretty well that day with the horses lining up nicely and their pecking order with our little wimpy in behind. My job as hazer was not to push too hard from behind, so the string had time to sort out their pecking order. While Andy only rode Buster all summer, leading Darky, and the string up front, I sometimes had more to do hazing from behind, so I had 3 horses I could spell off with each day. Major, he was a real nice sorrel gelding. That's Major there, and this is on Little Salmon Lake. And he was probably my favorite horse. Well, I don't know, one of the other ones was pretty nice too. But he was a real nice gelding. And actually there was a story with him too, and I had a real good lesson out of this one. Usually before we got all packed up, got all the horses packed up, ready for the day and ready to head out, we'd have a cup of tea over our little campfire before we climbed on and started out. So anyway, I came up behind Major, threw my chaps on from the back, and I guess he was sleeping, So it was the best lesson that I ever learned about horses. Even the quietest horse you gotta watch, because if he's sleeping, he's gonna protect himself. So he let fly with both feet, and he got me in both thighs, and just missed my knee and my hips. Give me a couple of bruises, but I went ass over, tea kettle over, excuse the language, over a log. But Andy, my partner, he just laughing his head off. So anyway, it was the best lesson I ever learned. And so anyway, and then here's Babe. She was a chunky little bay mare, a real nice little mare, and little wider to ride, probably about 14 in one hand. She wasn't very big, but she was a tough little mare. And then there was Bud. He was a rangy, fairly hot sorrel gelding, and Major and Babe were the easiest to handle, and I would save Bud for the more open areas because he was such a fast walker, and when you're following along, he tended to want to walk on top of the horse in front. So I would save him for the more open areas, it's just because he was such a fast walker. Besides the pack horses that we were bringing along, we had a brown gelding called Tom. It was a nice, quiet gelding for Norm the cook to ride once we met him and the rest of the crew back in the hills. We made it to Carmack's on our 3rd day after leaving the village at Pelly Crossing. And on arriving at Carmack's, here we are at Carmack's right here, there was one day up to Pelly, there's Pelly Farm, that's down on the Yukon River there. And there's Pelly Crossing where the trading post was. So each one of these is a campsite, these lines here. 1, 2, 3 down to Carmack's. And then we're going to start going in here. So on arriving at Carmack's, we met Dr. Wheeler with all the rest of our packing gear, tents and supplies for the next few weeks. In the Yukon, it was the first time I had seen these adjustable U.S. Army pack saddles. 2 big leather pads over the bars and hinged at the top. These would fit any horse, so it was a nice change from our wooden sawbucks. And I just brought this old wooden sawbuck. It's not a very good example one because it's a very poorly made one, but it's the only one I got left. But these are the old sawbucks, and that's the piggin string that we used to have on behind to tie up to the next horse. But anyway, the trouble with these ones is you had to really shape them and rasp them down to fit every horse. So you have one pack saddle for pretty well every horse. So they each had their own saddle. But these new U.S. Army ones, I'd never seen them before. And so these are the bars here, and the leather pads were on both sides of the bar with a hinge across the top. So they pretty well fit any horse. So it was pretty nice. So anyway, the only downside was the adjustable saddles was that you really had to watch carefully as they tended to slip side to side much easier, especially if you didn't have your loads really nice and even. So we got pretty good at weighing our loads up. We didn't have any scales, but you could do pretty good, turn around, go the other way, hoof again and try it again. And so from here on, we were packing 15 horses and saddling Norm's horse. And that would include packing the 2 saddle horses that I wasn't riding each day. We put a pack on them as well. Andy and I holed up in Carmax for a day, getting all the packs and gear sorted out for the trip. While there, Andy bought a bag of brown mosquito repellent powder that he called Boac. Would you know anything about that, Lindsay?
No.
It was a brown powder in the store there, and he called it Boac. And at night in our tent, we would just put a little bit of that in the tobacco can lid and light it, and it would just smolder away throughout the night. And it worked really well. You could just see the mosquitoes clearing out. So I have no idea what it was, but it worked. Yeah, that was the thing when I first got it. I'd never seen mosquitoes like they had in the Yukon before, you know, and living down south here. And Andy, he was a big bald-headed Irishman, and I remember when we first got going through our gear at Pelly Crossing, mosquitoes were all over his bald head. And I, God, Andy, how do you stand it here? I'm swatting away at mosquitoes. And he just said to me, looked down on me, well, you're not going to let a little thing like that bother you, are you? So he kind of put me in my place right off the bat. So anyway, later on in the summer, though, the mosquitoes weren't so bad. And in fact, I think you kind of build an immunity for them. I don't know any of you guys that have worked up north would probably know that. But the black flies would start to get pretty bad and bother the horses. They didn't bother us so much, but they really bothered the horses a lot. So sometimes we'd light some smudge fires, you know, get some green smoke going and stuff, and it really helped give the horses a little bit of relief from the black flies. The next day we headed into the hills, following a pack trail up the Little Salmon River towards Little Salmon Lake. This is where the Robert Campbell Highway goes through now. You can see it here. There's Carmax, and there's the highway. So there was no highway there then. So this goes right through the Ross River and continues on down and comes out at Watson Lake on the Alaska Highway. So that's the Robert Campbell Highway, highway number 4. They built that between 1960, I just found this out, 1960 and 1969. And then they built a spur road. There is a picture of it there. So anyway, this highway, right, built there, and when they built a spur road to serve the Yukon, the Faro Yukon mine. We made it to camp at Frenchman's Lake that first day after leaving Carmax. I can remember tying my air mattress to a couple of logs and going fishing after supper that night. And of course, you know, the sun really late. It's almost a midnight sun, but not quite. And that time of year, and so went out fishing after we get camp set up and horses out to graze and everything. And there was always good lake trout and jackfish in most of the lakes. So that's this is a picture of Frenchman Lake now. I got this off here. Just wanted to kind of get some better pictures than what I had. But so anyway, these pictures that I took were all with a little Brownie Hawkeye camera. Anyway, Andy had brought his old lead dog from his dog team that he used to have when he used to be trapping. He didn't have the dog team anymore, but he still had his dog King. He was a cross between a Husky and a St. Bernard, so he was a pretty big dog. He was getting pretty cranky in his old age, but he'd tag along behind us each day and sleep between Andy and I in our 9x12 wall tent at night. Andy was a big man, probably 200 pounds or more, and I was lucky to hit 160, I guess, at that time. And so anyway, King, he would crash between us during the night in the tent. And when he stretched out, he'd kind of push against Andy, he a few times he almost pushed me outside the tent. And I didn't dare wake him for fear of getting bit. Yeah, but otherwise, you know, he just traveled along with us all day, and he was pretty old. Besides our wall tent, we were packing in a large wall cook tent fitted with an opening for stovepipes and for a tin cook stove. And this was Norman Scherf's tent. So there's Norman. The first time we got a picture of him here, and just a little guy, but what a great guy, you know. And he was from Normandy, and he was actually a lawyer, but he was taking time off to go in the hills. So, and this is Andy Porterfield, and this is the cook tent. And, so this was Norman's tent. Now we also had these Mount Logan tents for the geologists. So there's two of them here, and there's a bunch of our gear all set up. And I think by the look at that picture, I think we've got the tables and that set up for supper outside that night, it looks like. But I just can't remember for sure. So anyway, we had those and there's another shot of the Mount Logan tents. That's what the geologists slept in. So after traveling along the Little Salmon Lake for 4 days, we arrived at our designated campsite on the northeast side of Little Salmon Lake. So here we're coming along. It took us 1, 2, 3, 4 days to get in there, and we camped right there on the northeast corner of Little Salmon. There's Little Salmon Lake there. We held up here waiting for John and the students, and Norman, who the Wilkinsons were going to be bringing in by riverboat. So they were going to, well, I guess they did. They left Pelly Crossing, went down the Pelly River to the Yukon River, down the Yukon River to Little Salmon River, and then I guess that's where they met the geologists, and then they brought them up Little Salmon River up to Salmon Lake to meet us guys. So these boats, they had their long, narrow wooden boats powered by outboard motors, and they could travel at a pretty good clip up the rivers. The next day would be the first day that we would be moving camp with all the geologists. Our job as packers and cook was to move camp to our next rendezvous spot and set up camp site while the geologists hiked the mountains and ridges picking up rock samples. We followed mostly game trails through the valleys, up one creek, down the next. Timberline was around 4,000 feet, so we were above timberline a lot of the time. We would travel about 15 miles a day, which is, I don't know, what's that, about 22 kilometers, something like that. About 15 miles a day to our next designated spot on the topographical map. And then look for a good spot to camp where we had good water, grazing, firewood, and trees to make poles for the tents. First thing to do was get all the horses unpacked, turned out to graze for the night, and hobbled a few of the leaders. Then cut poles and put up the cook tent first so Norman could get busy cooking supper. Norman was now riding his horse Tom with us each day. There's Norm on his horse Tom. He's got his pipe in his mouth there. I think he might have. Yeah, anyway. Sometimes we would hold up for a day or two while the geologists made side trips into interesting areas and or if we were maybe waiting to meet the plane coming in at one of the lakes. So he would come in every couple of weeks or so, bringing us fresh groceries and stuff and hauling out all the rock samples. In the mornings that we were set to move camp again, we would gather up all the horses before breakfast, then meet the crew for our morning meal. Dr. John would brief us on where we were headed that day on the topo map so we could plan our route. There's the horses in the morning, just before breakfast. It's either in the morning or evening. I'm not sure where some of these pictures were taken now, but while they would be heading out, Andy, Norman, and I would break camp and make their pack loads up and then start saddling the horses. There's Norman and Andy there again. We now had 15 packs to load, 15 diamond hitches to throw every morning, and we traveled, including the 2 saddle horses I wasn't riding that day. And our lead mare, Darky, always carried the heaviest load every day, close to 200 pounds. The others all carried about 150 pounds, And we always put the lightest kitchen load on our favorite little buckskin mare, Wimpy. I think that's why we probably had 200 pounds on Darky. She was probably carrying some of the weight that Wimpy. I can't remember exactly how we did that, but then we just let Wimpy hang along at the back. And so anyway, that's my mare Babe. That's Babe there. And I think that's one of the pack horses, Tony or Jim. I can't remember. There's Darky there, and there's Andy. After leaving Little Salmon Lake, we camped and traveled for 2 days south up a creek and over a pass and down Thomas Creek to camp on the second day on the North Big Salmon River. So here we're leaving Little Salmon Lake here. So it took us 2 camps to camp down here on the Little Salmon River. So this is where we start to follow my old topographical map. On this one here, this is going to cover this topographical map that you're going to see next. It's the only one I kept, and you know, it got kind of, you'll see it, we made a print of it and at Walls Printing, and it's a little tattered now, but carried it in my saddlebag every day. So you're going to see this map now. So that's it there. And so anyway, here we're coming in from Little Salmon Lake through this way, and then camp down on the Big Salmon River. North Big Salmon River. So from here we camped twice and went over past to Northern Lake. So here's the Northern Lake here. From here we headed down to cross South Creek and then east up over another pass and down to North Big Salmon again. So here we go here, across South Creek, and then up through a little pass here and then back down to North Big Salmon. From here we made 2 camps up the North Big Salmon River and Twin Creek to Askin Lake. So here we go, the camp here and a camp here at Askin Lake. This may have been another one of where the plane came in. I can't remember now, but the next after that we came down out of Askin Lake and met the Cannell Road and made a camp there. And this road was built during the war by the U.S. Army to connect Johnson's Landing down on the Alaska Highway down here to the oil fields at Norman Wells in the Northwest Territories. It wasn't maintained anymore, and the bridges were washed out, so it wasn't being used, but there was old derelict Army trucks and Caterpillars and machinery all just abandoned all along the road. It was kind of sad to see, but so anyway, that was our, we hit the Cannell Road there, and looks like it is a maintained highway now, and it's still called Cannell Road, but Highway 6. So we traveled east along the Cannell Road for a day while the guys hiked the ridges, and then we set up camp for a couple of days. And this is where we went along here and set up camp here. And so we'd heard that the native people at Ross River were next to starving, and so John let us take a couple of days off and go with a pack horse load of a bunch of groceries and stuff that we could spare, and so we took a pack horse load of stuff in there, Andy and I, and we arrived at the trading post run by a Scotchman and his wife, and they were the only whites in there at that time. They were actually raising a small herd of Scotch Highland cattle, and it's the first time I'd ever seen them outside of pictures. And actually, Scotch Highland, they're one of the oldest breeds there ever is, one of the oldest registered breeds. I ended up with a small herd of them out of Red Mountain here the last few years ago. Most of the people we saw there were the elders, the very young, and the women. And all the men that were able had gone farther up the Pelly River looking for moose to feed the village. And so after unloading our supplies, we stayed at the post overnight and then rode back to our camp the next day. So here we're leaving here now. This is where we're at now. So So leaving the Can Road, we headed south to join a creek heading back up into the high country to make camp just before the summit. So here we're going up here, and we made camp right in here. That's it there. And so the next day we headed over the summit and down to follow the upper Ram Creek over another pass to make camp down near the head of Porcupine Creek. So here we're coming here now. We've left this camp here, we're coming over another pass through here, and then down to the head of Porcupine Creek. From here, our route took us over another ridge and down to the head of Seagull Creek. So we're coming over another ridge and down to the head of Seagull Creek. It took one more camp to get down Seagull Creek to make camp at a little lake that drained into the McConnell River. So here we're coming down here, down to make camp at the head of the McConnell River. Then we left here. When we left here, it was up to the headwaters of the McConnell to make camp in the Alpine. So here we're heading up to McConnell and made camp up here in the Alpine. Our next camp was down a small creek leading to the Quetzal River, but instead of going all the way down, we branched off north over another little pass and down to follow Clocher Creek, down to camp on the Quetzal River. So we left this camp, followed that creek down a little bit, and then we cut over, went over this ridge here, and then camped down here on the Quetzal River. This is the Quetzal River here. Now we're heading south again, up the Quetzal River to near its headwaters to set up another camp. So here we're heading upriver, and we set up camp here. Next we headed over a high pass and down White Creek to camp near the McConnell. So here we're coming through here and we camped over and down there's the McConnell here, so we camped up here. And then so that's on Grizzly Creek, and so our next home would be down Grizzly Creek to the confluence of the McConnell and the larger Nitzelin River. So here we head down Grizzly Creek here to camp. There's the Nitzelin River here, and that's the McConnell. So we camped there. From this camp, we went north up a creek and probably over one of our highest passes and down to camp at Big Creek. So here's where we're going here, camping at Big Creek. And I think it might have been this crossing over this ridge above Timberline where we ran into one heck of a hailstorm. And so when horses not get into a big storm like that, they usually turn their butts to the storm. So anyway, that's what happened. The horses all turned their butts to the storm, and we just kind of sat and waited it out. As soon as the storm kind of eased off a bit, the fog rolled in right after, and we were trying to figure out from our topo map just exactly where we were. No GPS in those days. We wanted to hit the top of this one draw to go down, so we traveled along in the fog a bit along the ridge and thought we had found the right one. Well, we picked one too soon and found ourselves making our way down much too steep for the horses to handle easily. So it was no turning back a string this size, so we persisted by leading one animal at a time over the worst spots. And some of their packs were sliding up on their necks a bit and needed to be readjusted when we get them onto a more level area. It was one of our toughest days, but we finally made it down into the valley below and met the guys at our rendezvous spot. I might add at this time that in those days, all our ropes were just sisal ropes and not like the nylon ropes we have today. And after getting wet in a storm like this, they tended to stretch quite a bit. And the packs would all need retightening after a storm, so you'd have to stop and go through the whole string, tighten everything up. From our camp down on Big Creek, we followed it down the Rose River, following the Rose along the Cattle Road down to camp where Fish Creek joins in. So here we are here, met the Rose River, and that's where we're back on the Cattle Road again, coming down to camp here near Fish Creek. We then traveled to Nitsilin River. Making 2 camps back to our previous spot because the guys wanted to work these mountains a bit. So we traveled two camps back here again, and once they had finished that, then we traveled our way back again to here. We backtracked west 2 camps to our previous site on the Rose River and the Cannell Road. Heading northwest now, we were at the southern edge of Dr. Wheeler's planned exploration. For our next camp, we would be on the Big Salmon Lake. And so here's Big Salmon Lake here. This is where I remember the plane coming in again. And one time on a day off, probably on a Sunday, as we would always take Sundays off, or else we were waiting for a plane or something. Andy and I went up hunting and got a caribou to give us some nice fresh meat. Yeah, that got a little wet, that one. Luckily, we had been packing along this special tent just for this purpose, which allowed us to hang our meat away from the flies. It was basically a tall cylinder screen with a canvas top and a canvas bottom, and so we'd set that up, suspended between a tripod, teepee style. And so we could suspend it with the meat inside with 3 poles, and then the wind could blow through it really nice, hardening off the outside, and it kept the flies away. The meat was a really nice treat, and I don't remember how long we were able to keep it, but Norman must have done a great job cooking the fresh caribou in us all, but it's a long time ago, so I really don't remember how long we kept that meat, but I know it was good. And we did keep it for quite some time. I can't remember exactly where it was, but we came across a couple of prospectors camped at one of the lakes. Here they see one of the prospectors here, and that's their camp, and this is the 3 student geologists here. So anyway, they had some drilling equipment that they needed to get into their claim. So they must have flown, this must have been at one of the lakes, I can't remember which one, because they obviously had been flown in here with this equipment. And so they had this drilling equipment that they needed to get into their claim, which was a few miles away. So with Dr. John's okay, we took the day off and offered to haul it in for them using 2 of our horses. So they were really thankful for the help. But it was really awkward stuff to pack, and I can't imagine those guys packing these things in on their back. It was pretty hard, awkward stuff. And the drill steel like this was really hard to keep on the horse from not sliding out, You had to get quite a few half hitches around just to hold it so they wouldn't slip and hurt the horses. They could slide forward and hit into their neck or rub their back end or whatever. But we got them all up there. It wasn't very many miles, I don't remember just how long, but we got it all in for them, and they were pretty thankful. I remember a few other incidents that happened that summer. One was we were fording one of the rivers, and we found a pretty good spot to cross, only there was a fairly deep pool just downriver a bit. So we needed to keep all the horses above this or we'd get in all the packs wet. And so Andy and I got the whole string crossed just fine, and I told Norman, who was riding Tom, to just follow exactly where we went. So after getting all our horses across with nice dry packs, we saw that Norman and his horse, Tom, had drifted down into the deep water. Oh no. Norm had come off his horse, which was scrambling up on our side on the bank, riderless, and Norman was swimming frantically towards the shore. I remember throwing him a rope, and so we could get him pulled out. We got him pulled out, soaking wet, and trying to catch his breath. He was really puffing hard. And Norman always carried this special pipe that he loved to smoke, and the first words that came out of his mouth, panting, was, "I lost my pipe! I lost my pipe!" So Well, Andy and I laughed. We wasn't worried about his expensive camera, just his pipe. But anyway, watching the water, here comes this pipe floating right back to us in a little back eddy. And I remember that day so clearly. Yeah. After getting him dried out, it probably made for a pretty good story around the campfire that night, because we always had lots of stories around the fire. When we had to, another instance, when we had to help some of the geologists get across some of the larger creeks and the rivers to start their hikes, we could let them climb on behind one of the packs on the pack horses, just some of the quieter ones. And in our string, we had two big bay horses that looked almost identical, called Tony and Jim. They would have been a heck of a team, that's for sure. I can't remember which one was safe to ride and the other not, but anyway, this one river crossing, we needed to ferry them all across. I told Jim, one of our geologists, in my haste to get them across, to climb aboard what I thought mistakenly was, I picked the wrong one. And, yeah, I know. Well, you can guess what happened. The one he got on got to bucking, and Jim ended up going for a pretty cold swim. He was cold and wet, but okay. We got him into dry clothes, and you know, I don't remember now, but I'm sure I must have really been apologizing. And yeah, so another story for the campfire. On one of our trips down Witch Creek, I don't remember, we got into a real old forest fire burn with timber down everywhere. And we had to keep going, you know, because we had to meet the geologists at our next rendezvous spot on the topo map. And so I remember spending hours hacking our way through with axes and a sweet saw, and finally got to the campsite quite a bit later than planned, but we got there. And then and traveling across some of the muskags in the valleys, like some of these valleys were pretty flat, and the muskags were quite big. And so anyway, there was sometimes a problem, especially later on when the permafrost melted down more. Sometimes some of our horses would get bogged down, and after getting their packs off, we'd get the ropes on them and get them pulled out. Pack them up again and hit the trail. Our good old lead mare Darky seemed to be getting stuck a little more often than she should, so we'd pull her pack off each time and get her out. One time we noticed that she wasn't really stuck at all. She was just laying there with her knees and hocks all tucked under her belly. No, devil. So, okay, so we decided enough of this, so we just left her there this one time, moved the string ahead out of sight as fast as we could, and then snuck back just in time to see her start to whinny for her bunch, look around a little bit, and panic, got up, pack and all, and then hurried back to her herd. And I don't remember her ever trying that again, but yeah, foxy old devil. The two big geldings, Tony and Jim, I mentioned earlier, one you could ride, one you couldn't. I mentioned earlier, would always position themselves in the middle of the pack string each day. A couple of times I remember them leading me astray. I'd be riding along behind through the timber and not being able to see Andy up front. And then we'd come out into the open, only to realize I only had the back half of the string with Tony and Jim in the lead. The two little devils, you know, and I'm sure I must have had a few good words for these guys, and I can't mention them here, but anyway, I'd find tracks real quick from the front half and hurriedly get my half back to Andy and the string up front. But that happened a couple times. Those devils just going through the trees. Oh, I think we want to go over here. No, we're not following there. We want to go here. They didn't like where Andy was going. And another time we were traveling along the side of the lake. And the flies were pretty bad that day, and as they were lots of days. And it was either Tony or Jim, I don't know which one, but one of them decided to go for a swim, roll in the water, soak his pack completely. I can't remember what all got wet now, but we must have got it all dried out at camp, or maybe it was all rock samples, I don't know, but can't remember now. But he sure did go for a good swim, the devil. There were 3 horses in the bunch. They'd like to give us a bit of a rodeo starting out in the mornings. Blazo, he was a roll-the-nose, roach-back, day gelding. He was the worst of the bunch, firing off most mornings. Shorty, who you can see a picture of him here, he was a real good-looking little buckskin horse, and doesn't look buckskin there, but he was. And that would have made a real good saddle horse, we thought, but he also liked to throw a bit of a tantrum the odd morning. We actually, Andy and I kept talking about maybe trying to ride him before we got him back to the farm, but then we'd get thinking about it, and you know, we couldn't dare get hurt out there because we were pretty well isolated, so we didn't, but we kind of always wished we could have got him going, because he sure would have been a nice saddle horse. These two, Shorty and Blazo, they could buck pretty good, but they never fired until we got our diamond hitches all snugged down and tight, and I don't remember ever losing a pack either. So then there was Marvin, who was a short, blocky buckskin tank of a horse, and we'd get him all packed up and turn him loose. He couldn't buck like the others, but he would take off galloping and crow-hopping till he either ran out of steam or got hung up between a couple of trees. So these guys were always good for the rest of the day, except for Blazo, who had a hard back to keep an even load on, and so we'd quite often have to stop halfway through the day and you know, adjust his pack and get him even up again, because you had to be really careful. If the pack rides too far on one side all the time, you can soar a horse's back up pretty good, so you really have to watch that. So another time, these 3 pictures here. There's Andy and King, and that's our wall tent there. And that's myself holding as Buster on the one Andy rode every day, and that's my horse Bud there, the more hot one. Yeah, I would kind of think he must have been part thoroughbred or something. He wasn't really built for the mountains, that's for sure. So, we'd always, on the trail, we'd always stop for a lunch break and let the horses graze a little bit, and we always packed our sandwiches along, had lunch, and the horses wouldn't take their packs off, they'd just go grazing along. We didn't have muzzles or anything on any of them, so they could just eat. So another time on a day off, Andy and I were up looking for sheep. We weren't hunting sheep, we just had a day off and wanted to go up and see some. And I wish I had taken some pictures of some. This is a picture I got off the internet a few days ago. So they were stone sheep in that area, and they're mixed coloring. Like these 4 all look very similar, but the ones we saw varied quite a bit. You know, everything from almost all white with darker markings to darker with white markings. But I always kind of thought they must have been a kind of a cross between the Dall sheep, which are all white, and and our Rocky Mountain sheep, which are brownish gray. So we were lucky to see a few small bands. So anyway, on this one day, we came across this plane crash from a year or more before. It was really interesting, but kind of sad to see, as it must have been a total loss of life. A couple of pictures there of the plane crash. So now we're back at our camp at Big Salmon Lake, and we start on our northward journey back up. So we're down here on Big Salmon Lake. So moving our camp while the geologists hiked the ridges, picking up more rock samples each day. Leaving Big Salmon Lake, we forded the Big Salmon River and up Gray Creek to our next camp. So here we're leaving Big Salmon Lake and up Gray Creek and over a pass to camp on South Creek. Scurvy Creek. And so then next we went over a pass to the Sheep Creek. So here we are here. We went over another pass to Sheep Creek. And then down to camp on the Big Salmon River. So we headed on, oh yeah, sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. Camp here, oh there's that camp there, and then there we go. And there's Sheep Creek here, and then over and down to camp on the Big Salmon River. It's easier to see on this map I got here than the one I got on the computer. But there's the Big Salmon River there, heading out that way. So from here we traveled over a pass to Caribou Creek. So here we traveled over this pass to Caribou Creek, and following it north up to the headwaters and over another pass and back down to camp on Moose Creek. There's Moose Creek here. Then looping back, because the geologists wanted to check some more hills out here, so we went back and camped at this camp here. And then from here we traveled to the head of Moose Creek. And over a pass and down to camp at Pleasant Lake. There's Pleasant Lake there. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's Pleasant Lake there. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure the plane came in there again. From here we went to the headwaters of the North Big Salmon. So here we're back on the North Big Salmon. So it's kind of confusing. This is the Big Salmon River, and this is the North Big Salmon, which is heading out this way. So we camped there. And from here, we started to make our back down the North Big Salmon River to camp up on Thomas Creek. So this may be one of our longest days here. We camped up here. I think that was probably around 20 miles. And this on Thomas Creek. So here now we're going to be leaving that map and getting back to the other Yukon map. And, so heading north from Thomas Creek over a pass. So here we are here. So we headed over a pass and crossed the Burgundy River. And on our way to Drury Lake via Patson Creek. So here we're heading out over this way, and we're heading for Drury Lake right up here. There it is there. We have now left Mount Topomath area and heading to meet the plane at Drury Lake. This is where Andy King and I parted company with Dr. Wheeler, the three student geologists, and our friend Norman the cook. They were all flown out along with most of our pack gear, but they left us with enough gear and provisions that Andy and I needed for our trek back with all the horses back to Pelly Farm. So these next pictures, just few blurred pictures taken off horseback and going over some of the passes. This one, that's snow laying up on one of the passes there. And that's another one going over another pass. And then, yeah, that's a nice picture. A lot of these colored pictures were just like that, or well, a lot even brighter than that when I took them years ago. Too bad that I didn't save them better, darn it. But anyway, it is what it is. And so there's, this is at Drury Lake. So there's Andy on Buster. And Jim, the geologist, wanted to have a ride that day, so he climbed on Tom and got riding around. And there's Andy, and that's Tom. I used to think that was Darky, but that's Norm's horse, Tom, and King. And that's a double exposure that happens with those old cameras. And that's Jim. He's got himself a real nice fish out of Drury Lake. And that's one of the Logan tents, and King and the cook tent. Yeah. And there's Dr. Wheeler. I wish I'd had some more pictures of Dr. Wheeler. And he's carrying his ice pick because he was quite the mountain climber. And this is Dan, one of the geologists, the students. And that's the whole crew and the plane. There's Norman and Jim and Milton and Daniel and Andy and Buster and Dr. John and Bud and myself. So that's the last day we were all together until we met up again in Whitehorse. So anyway, so it took us 4 days to get back out to Carmax, and this is showing our trip out. You know, you could just kind of let the horses line out on their own pecking order and just make sure they all kept in line. And so this is heading out. So this is heading out from Drury Lake, so a little bit different way than what we had came in on the first time. So we're heading for Carmax. So this is where we're heading out now. We're heading out this way. So 1, 2, 3, 4 camps out to Carmax. So then it took us another 3 days along the highway. Once we hit the highway at Carmax, back north to Pelly Crossing. So here we are going back to Pelly Crossing. 1, 2, 3 camps up there. And but yeah, it's kind of a hard story to tell here, but a sad thing happened on our journey back along the highway that time. And we had all the lead animals all hobbled for the night. There was lots of grazing along the highway. And so then one morning we woke up and we realized that our little horse Wimpy had lost her other eye. Yeah, I know, it was really, we don't know whether a truck had grazed her or a rock from a tire hit her or whether she ran into a branch or what. But yeah, it was just real sad because, you know, we almost had her back to the ranch, darn it. And where she would have been retired and live out the rest of her days. So sadly we had to put her down. But it was a sad ending to one of the best summers I'd ever had. And this whole trek was so well organized by Dr. Wheeler. And he was such an amazing party chief to work for. Once we reached Pelly Crossing, the horses were glad to get back on that little ferry. And it was one easy day, taking them all right back to 20 miles, back down to Pelly Farm. So anyway, yeah, there's Pelly Farm again. And the Wilkinsons came down, once we got the horses down to the farm, the Wilkinsons came back down with their boat to take Andy and I back up to the trading post where we met Dr. John, who drove us back to Whitehorse. Up there at that time, you know, wages certainly weren't what they are now by a long means. We were getting paid $13 a day for every day we were out, you know, including Sundays, you know. And so we had a pretty good chunk of change in our pockets because we didn't spend any money all summer. You know, and where I was down south, it was only $12 a day in pound for packers and wranglers. So anyway, so we did pretty good up there. Not bad back then. We celebrated with the whole crew in Whitehorse and said our goodbyes to everyone and that we had spent so many days with out in the hills. It was just a great summer. And Norman flew out right away to Vancouver and went back to being a lawyer. I stayed on for a couple more weeks with Andy in Whitehorse and visited his home in Atlan before flying out to Vancouver. Because my folks were down there now, and I had to get down there and get some work for the winter, get through the winter. But this was, I think it was the last time the Department of Highways used these horses, Department of Mines used these horses for their geological expeditions in the Yukon. From then on, they started using helicopters, which I know Dr. Wheeler didn't like, but Andy told me a few years later that another government outfit had taken some of these horses out the following year. But as far as we know, that was the last time that they ever had these government pack expeditions. So this is what the original color ones were like before Skylar. So thankfully, you know, brought them out, brought the life out. Yeah, so they made a great job. Thank you, Skylar. And yeah, so thank you all for coming, and I hope that you were interested. I want to thank Brenda for running the pictures for me. It was pretty hard.